Hey guys, how's it going? Avishai here with another episode of What Israel Is. And this one's special because it is the first episode that will also be uh, filmed by the webcam and uploaded on my new YouTube account, which is simply named Avishai Edinburgh, which is my name. There won't be any editing, and I won't be partaking in any ownage videos. This is not what my aim is, and I have no intention of, hiding my face or obscuring my identity. Um, I'm not ashamed of who I am, and I do not feel in any particular danger of, any repercussions coming my way. Not just yet, at any rate. And I wanted to begin by maybe talking a bit about another thing with relation to the whole President-elect Trump thing. And I saw a lot of people that were kind of trying to discredit him before the election, with regards to, they were asking how come Trump voters, if they're so anti-establishment, how come, and from blue collar country background, how come they're voting for a New York billionaire? And I feel that this bewilderment is kind of fake and a bit hypocritical. And I feel that it's hypocritical because I don't think that those critical of Trump think of him as a New York billionaire. And I guess I should elaborate, but were you to try and look into portrayal of Trump within more left-leaning media in America, I think he's often portrayed as this kind of a buffoon, a simpleton. I actually think, well, he is, but there is something else. I think a lot of Trump voters identify him for other reasons, because another thing is that liberals often tried or still try, I don't know, to discredit him being a millionaire. They say that he's a failed businessman, etc., etc. And it may be the case, but I don't think it's just that. I think a lot of the intellectual elite, mind you, not the financial elite, don't regard him as or don't like to regard him as a millionaire, because they don't consider him to be an exemplar of what it is to be rich. It's not about the wealth, but rather about how he behaves. And when they look at him, they don't see a rich man, they see a Nouveau-riche, a person who is newly rich and doesn't know how to behave like a rich person. A rich person is an aristocrat. He's supposed to be refined, he's supposed to have manners, etc., etc. Things that Trump evidently lacks. He puts his name on stuff like his fucking tower, and he brands all sorts of shit, like he has Trump vodka, and I don't know, and all of those things. And there's the whole thing with the short fingers. Many people might not know about where it originated, but there was this satirist who called him a short-fingered vulgarian. And they kind of missed the thing here is that while the short fingers was what offended Trump, vulgarian might have been the more important insult here. Because that's what the intellectual elite thinks of him. And that resonated with blue-collar country people. Because when they look at depictions of Donald Trump on SNL or, I don't know, whatever satire show, it resonates with them because they've been there. How many times have they seen these New York folk put on an overall for a skit and go, "How y'all doing? I don't know too much things because I don't read too much good," or something like that. It may not be racism because they're whites or whatever, but it doesn't even matter. They know they're being scorned. And they know that this man is being scorned by the same people who are scorning them. Just food for thought. That's not even the main talking point I wanted to discuss today, and it's this. I saw an opinion piece on the Forward. Now, Forward is a liberal American magazine, primarily, I believe, from Jews. It started as a Yiddish written magazine, but that's no longer the case. Anyways, within that opinion piece, the author implored or called for Jews to register, for Jewish Americans to register as Muslims, and to do so in case that Donald Trump enacts his planned policy of registering Muslim Americans as such. So, kind of act of solidarity to shield Muslims from persecution. Now, I don't quite know how I feel about that, but there's some part of me that resists. And for one thing, the author seems to fall very neatly into this perception of Jews as people who are into the whole social justice stuff, who are inherently liberal, etc. Now, I'm a liberal Jew, but kind of reminded me of something else, and it's about the civil rights movement in the 60s, and how very abruptly there was a falling out between the Jews and the blacks within the movement, ending with Jews being shoved out of the movement. And it had to do with a lot of things. For one thing, the advent of black racism and segregationist movements, like of the Nation of Islam and the Black Panthers, which regarded Jews primarily, first and foremost, as whites, and later on as even worse than whites in some manners. And then there was also other things which had more to do with policy. So Jews, for example, primarily did not agree with the doctrine of affirmative action. And this has a lot to do with Jewish culture, I believe. And it has to do a lot with why Jews are so supposedly overrepresented, as if there was some law of representation. So they're overrepresented in the media, overrepresented in journalism, in film and television, overrepresented in medicine, in law, in political activism. They are overrepresented because they are over enthusiastic. So they're there because they wanted to be there, and they wanted hard enough to make their will a reality. And this is, again, something that I believe is very Jewish. It's about, there's this whole character of the Jewish mom, the Jewish mother, who, beyond being very fretful for her child, etc., is also, there's this sense of parents pushing their children to excel at school, but also to choose the correct lines of work. This is not always successful, and I am a living testament of that. But then again, I'm also living in Israel, and Israel is something different as far as Jews are concerned. But this is something within us which, there's a saying, I think I might have said it before on the podcast. It's in Hebrew and it goes, Im en anili mili, which means, if I do not stand for myself, who shall? And this is Jewish philosophy in a nutshell. This is everything that you need to know about what essentially is the psychology of the Jew, supposedly. Extreme independence. And it also flies against everything, white anti-Semites think about Jews. About Jews being behind a plot, of integrating and thus, putting an end to the white race, etc., etc. And them being behind, being behind this whole affirmative action and everything that goes against conservative values. So, no, Jews were against affirmative action because they side as prejudice. They side as unequal. And they were against prejudiced legislation. So that's that. And I have a feeling that the role of Jews, supposedly, if there ever was such a role, to be protectors of the disenfranchised, it's over. Not because of what we want as liberal Jews, but because of what the disenfranchised think of us, really. This is not to say that they're all, anti-Semites. Many are. But we'll get to that. For one thing, the ideology, the leading ideology behind the whole social justice movement is kinda anti-Semitic. Not in the sense of, a more explicit anti-Semitism of the Rothschilds or controlling everything and Jews did 9/11 and everything of that sort. But more anti-Semitic in I kind of feels maybe cheap saying anti-Semitic, but it's definitely anti-Israel, for one thing. And it seems to those people like they can't rationalize why a Jew would be pro-Israel. The idea sounds alien to them, and I don't think they've ever stopped to ponder because it's so clear to them that Israel is evil. But they also have this expectation that Jews will swear fealty to the cause of social justice and thus also disavow Israel. I've heard a lot of these horror stories about Jews in America within colleges, etc., being kind of expected to disavow Israel. As for, I mentioned this, but also, the disenfranchised seem to be more, if we talked about proportions beforehand, well, disproportionately anti-Semitic, more than even rural whites. Sometimes even much more than rural whites. Sorry. Apologies. And on that point, I have an article by a British Muslim. I'm not going to read the whole of it, but there are some parts that I wanted to read, and it's from the New Statesman. Again, the author is a journalist by the name of Mehdi Hassan, a British Muslim of Pakistani extraction, I believe. And it goes like this. He begins by talking about a labor peer by the name of Lord Nazir Ahmed, who was charged with, killing, I suppose. He was involved in a car crash that killed a man, and following that went on a full-fledged anti-Semitic diatribe about how the Zios are after him and everything. And this is what Mehdi Hassan has to say. It pains me to have to admit this, but anti-Semitism isn't just tolerated in some sections of the British Muslim community. It's routine and commonplace. Any Muslims reading this article, if they are honest with themselves, will know instantly what I'm referring to. It's our dirty little secret. You could call it the banality of Muslim anti-Semitism. I can't keep count of the number of Muslims that I've come across, from close friends and relatives to perfect strangers, for whom weird and wacky anti-Semitic conspiracy theories are the default explanation for a range of national and international events. Who killed Diana and Dottie? The Mossad, say many Muslims. They didn't want the British heir to the throne having an Arab stepfather. What about 9/11? Definitely those damn Yehudis. I mean, why else were 4,000 Jews in New York told to stay home from work on the morning of September 11th? How about the financial crisis? Jewish bankers, obviously. Oh, and the Holocaust? Don't be silly. Never happened. The truth is that the virus of anti-Semitism has infected members of the British Muslim community, both young and old. No, the ongoing Israel-Palestine conflict hasn't helped matters, but this goes beyond the Middle East. How else to explain why British Pakistanis are so often the most ardent advocates of anti-Semitic conspiracies, even though there are so few Jews living in Pakistan? So it goes on, and I won't read the entire bit, but again, it is worth noting that this man is not a Tory, not a right winger. He's not a Zionist in any shape or form, but I feel that the sentiment that he's trying to, it's noble, and it's very rare. The admitting of, these explicit biases within even a disenfranchised community. This is noble. And this is something I feel very strongly about. We can feel empathy for the disenfranchised, but to expect them to be less human, to be less morally responsible, is morally monstrous. And going back, I feel that if Jews are to continue playing this role of defenders of the disenfranchised, well, for one thing, they need to be actually wanted in that role, and not in a cursory sense, and not when needed. If they're not appreciated, then why bother? That's it for today. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you guys next week. Until then, have an awesome weekend. Bye, guys.